Above the green mountain, the white ball of light began to flash violently, and countless white runes shot out from within it. Then with a dull bang, the massive sphere suddenly exploded and scattered into countless wisps of white spiritual light. The golden beetle's enormous body swayed in midair before finally steadying itself again. Its clouded eyes slowly cleared, and the white vortex deep within its pupils gradually vanished. Stunned, it looked around in every direction. What is going on? Had I not already returned to the insect race and even advanced into the great encompassment realm? Why am I here instead? The golden beetle roared in shock and fury. At that moment its expression froze, and it suddenly turned to stare ahead. It had instantly sensed the aura of that same kindred creature. Not only was it still alive, it seemed even stronger than before. Could it be that I fell into an illusion? The anger and shock in the beetle's eyes ebbed away like a receding tide as it swept its gaze across the surroundings. Everything around it was calm. A warm breeze drifted across the sky above the green mountain peak. There was not the slightest sign of anything unusual. The golden beetle quickly withdrew its gaze, its expression flickering uncertainly. It lifted one foreleg and tapped lightly through the air. At once, golden light rippled across its body, rapidly gathering before it to form a golden circular array. The array spun slowly, countless golden runes leaping and flickering within it, as though it were casting some secret art. Suddenly, the golden beetle stiffened, and a trace of shock appeared in its eyes. So 20 years have already passed. Its face became ugly beyond words, and beneath that ugliness there was even a hint of fear. The golden beetle had lived in the wilderness for ages. Its strength was immense, and its understanding of this place far surpassed that of the insect race, the beast race, and the others. It was on an entirely different level from an outsider like Han Li. The insect race, the beast race, and the rest were merely minor tribes living on the outer fringes of the wilderness, insignificant in the grand scheme of things. The true rulers of this land were the 4 great royal clans hidden in its depths. The power of those 4 clans was vast beyond measure. Each occupied immense territories and had long since divided up the truly spirit-rich regions, deep within the wilderness. Their ranks were filled with experts. Not only were golden immortals numerous, even great beings were far from rare. And within each clan there sat one grand ascension ancestor. Together, those 4 were known as the 4 saints. The golden beetle itself was tremendously powerful, already at the late Great E stage, and its true form was that of a gold-devouring immortal, an existence of terrifying might. Although the 4 great royal clans were powerful, it had never truly regarded them with much fear. The only ones it truly dreaded were the 4 saints. This place was already within the domain of the 4 great royal clans, specifically the territory of the heaven-reaching rat clan. The golden beetle had chased Han Li with desperate madness earlier because it wanted to intercept him before he entered this region. Yet without realizing it, it had been trapped in place by an illusion for a full 20 years. 20 years to it was no more than the blink of an eye. But the one capable of confining it for that long, that was another matter entirely. Golden light flickered in its eyes as it fell silent. In the wilderness, the only ones capable of trapping it were the 4 saints. It was said that the ancestor Gu Shun of the heaven-reaching rat clan had not remained in the wilderness for many years, roaming unpredictably with no fixed whereabouts. Nor had there ever been any rumor that he excelled in illusions. On the other hand, the neighboring Sky Fox clan, whose lands bordered those of the heaven-reaching rat clan, was famed for its mastery of illusion arts. Could it have been the grand ascension ancestor of the Sky Fox clan who acted? But why? Was it merely to warn it not to trespass into the lands of the 4 royal clans? Countless thoughts flashed through the golden beetle's mind, its eyes flickering without cease. After a long moment, greed won out in the end. Its body erupted with golden light and transformed into a huge golden mass that shot forward like lightning. On a cliff platform above a pitch-black abyss, one golden and one white ball of light floated in midair, each radiating waves of immense pressure. Within those spheres 2 figures could be seen. They were Jin Tong and Pixiu. Their strength had advanced greatly by now, but they still could not adapt to the dense baleful aura at the bottom of the abyss, so they had returned to the upper reaches to cultivate. At that moment the golden sphere suddenly scattered, revealing Jin Tong's figure as she turned toward a certain direction, her face grave. At the bottom of the abyss, Han Li sat cross-legged on a clean boulder, silently circulating his immortal spiritual power, as he examined the dense baleful aura within his body. Not far away, Imo Guang was controlling that gray-grady corpse and sitting cross-legged as well, black light flickering around him while he continued absorbing the dense baleful aura from the surroundings. Although he had succeeded in taking control of this body, its foundation was still unstable and required constant reinforcement. The corpse now looked noticeably fuller and more solid. Its flesh no longer seemed shriveled, its skin had become smooth and clean, and it had changed into a black robe. At a glance, it looked almost no different from a living person. Han Li's expression shifted slightly, and he opened his eyes. "Uncle, this is bad. That thing must have woken up. It's heading here now." Jin Tong's voice rang out in his mind. Han Li's brows lifted slightly as he rose to his feet, but instead of moving at once, he lowered his gaze and began calculating on his fingers. Exactly 20 years. It seems that voice did not deceive me after all. He murmured to himself, then glanced at Imo Guang beside him. Seeing that the latter was still cultivating, he did not disturb him. With a flicker of his body, he transformed into a streak of azure light and flew upward. At that same moment, Imo Guang opened his eyes and looked toward Han Li's departing figure. Gray light flickered faintly in his gaze. Han Li soon arrived at the cliff platform where Jin Tong had been waiting earlier. Pixiu and Jin Tong stood at his side. "Uncle." Jin Tong glanced at Han Li, seeming as though she wanted to say something but held back. "Jin Tong, do your gold-devouring immortals fear the baleful aura here?" Han Li asked suddenly as he looked into the rolling black mists within the abyss. "It is not exactly fear, but our kind truly does not like this baleful aura," Jin Tong said, as though she had realized something. "If we could have escaped, we would have fled from that gold-devouring immortal years ago. Since it insists on chasing us this relentlessly, we may as well wait for it here and give it a proper welcome," Han Li said after a moment of silence, a smile suddenly appearing on his face. "Your cultivation has risen greatly, uncle, and I've already reached the great realm myself. With Imo Guang that sycophant added in, if we all join forces, we may not be unable to kill that bastard," Jin Tong said at once, her eyes lighting up with fierce excitement. "Boss, there's still me too." Pixiu moved closer and said weakly. "Yes, there's Little White too. At the very least, you can probably block half a hit." Jin Tong patted Pixiu on the head and nodded solemnly. "Even though our strength has increased a great deal, the other side is still a late-grade gold-devouring immortal. We cannot afford the slightest carelessness. Jin Tong, estimate for me how long before it arrives," Han Li said gravely. "At its current speed, if nothing unexpected happens, it should reach us within a month," Jin Tong said after closing her eyes to sense for a moment. "A month? That will be enough," Han Li murmured. Jin Tong and Pixiu looked at each other, both puzzled. "During this time, continue cultivating here. Jin Tong, keep watch on that gold-devouring immortal's movements at all times. If anything changes, inform me immediately," Han Li instructed. "Uncle, leave it to me," Jin Tong replied at once. After giving his instructions, Han Li turned and flew back down toward the bottom of the abyss, reaching it in no time. Imo Guang had stopped cultivating at some point. When he saw Han Li descend, he rose and cupped his fist in greeting. Han Li wasted no words and directly told him that the gold-devouring immortal was on its way. "Fellow Taoist Imo Guang, when the time comes, I will need your strength," Han Li said in the end. "No problem. I'll begin adjusting my state from now on. When the battle begins, I dare not promise too much, but maintaining grade combat strength for the time it takes a stick of incense to burn should not be an issue," Imo Guang agreed without hesitation. "Good." Han Li's expression relaxed and a faint smile appeared. As soon as he finished speaking, Imo Guang walked aside and sat down cross-legged once more. Han Li fell into thought. A moment later, he waved a hand, and a great pile of formation flags, formation plates, and other array tools appeared before him. At the same time, golden light flashed beside him, and the figure of Xie Daoren appeared out of thin air. "Fellow Taoist Xie, help me set these formations throughout this place," Han Li said. Xie Daoren nodded, took part of the formation tools from Han Li, and the two of them immediately got to work throughout the bottom of the abyss. They remained busy for more than 10 days before finally stopping. At that moment Hanli floated in midair above the abyss floor, chanting under his breath as he flicked out a spell seal. Points of light suddenly appeared all throughout the abyss, brightening and dimming in response to one another. Streams of powerful force emerged out of nowhere. Some were fierce and overbearing, others soft yet resilient, and all of them echoed with one another, stirring the baleful aura in the abyss into violent turbulence. Then just as suddenly the lights vanished. The waves of power disappeared with them, completely swallowed by the dense baleful aura without leaving even the slightest trace. The roiling mist soon calmed again. Seeing this, Hanli nodded, a look of satisfaction appearing on his face. He then descended to the ground, sat cross-legged, and waved a hand. Flashes of light shimmered all around him as one immortal treasure after another appeared, each radiating dazzling spiritual light in different colors, mixed with fluctuations of law power. The sight was magnificent. Hanli picked them up one by one and began carefully inspecting them, making the final preparations for the great battle to come. He had already done everything that could be done, but the enemy was still a late great gold-devouring immortal. He had no confidence at all and could not afford even the slightest mistake. He checked each immortal treasure in turn, then stored it within himself. Before long, he had examined them all and put them away. By then, only a single emerald green gourd remained on the ground. It was that profound heavenly treasure. Hanli studied the gourd for a long moment, then picked it up and focused on the mouth of the vessel. That dim patch near the opening was still there, but it had deepened significantly and now looked much closer to the rest of the gourd. The green glow emitted by the entire gourd was brighter than before, and it seemed to have shrunk slightly as well. A smile appeared on Hanli's face when he saw this. Over the years, while fleeing from the gold-devouring immortal, he had not stopped watering the gourd with green liquid. It seemed that the effort had indeed worked. If he continued ripening it with the green liquid, then in less than 100 years this emerald gourd should mature completely. Looking at the gourd in his hand, Hanli suddenly opened his mouth and spat out a stream of azure light, which sank into it. At once, a layer of green radiance spread across the surface of the gourd, and countless tiny runes emerged, flowing endlessly like little streams of water. A wave of law power spread outward, forcing away all the baleful aura within several yards. Hanli drew a quiet breath, then slowly closed his eyes. His divine sense followed into the glowing green gourd and entered that emerald space within. This place had not changed much from before. Wisps of green haze still filled the entire area, swirling and winding together to form a slowly rotating green vortex. Only now, the green haze had become noticeably denser, and a special aura faintly emanated from it. That must have been the effect of the green liquid from the bottle ripening it earlier. At the center of the green vortex floated several small azure swords. They were the azure bamboo cloudswarm swords, along with the miniature pavilion immortal treasure, obtained from the Nethercold Immortal Manor. After all these years of refinement, the spiritual power of the azure bamboo cloudswarm swords had been completely drawn inward. Their blades now emitted only a faint azure glow, making them seem like ordinary spirit treasures. As for the first sword he had placed inside the gourd, its spiritual power had been restrained to the utmost extreme. There was almost no visible glow left on its surface. Amid the other flying swords, it actually looked like the plainest one of all. Yet Hanli was linked to it by heart and mind, and he could clearly sense just how terrifying the power sleeping inside it would be once unleashed. After withdrawing his divine sense, Hanli opened his eyes and waved a hand. One flying sword shot out from the emerald gourd and landed in his palm. He gripped it lightly and activated it. With a thunderous boom, a heaven-shaking peal of lightning erupted. A dazzling expanse of golden lightning burst from the sword, and countless fine arcs of electricity shot out, instantly blanketing a vast area of space around him. The lightning was blindingly bright, and the baleful aura lingering nearby immediately churned wildly and retreated in all directions. Joy flashed through Hanli's eyes, and the corners of his mouth lifted slightly. As expected, after being refined by this profound heavenly gourd, the power of these azure bamboo cloudswarm swords had grown tremendously. With another gesture, 8 more swords flew out of the gourd, and the one in his hand rose into the air at his command. 9 small azure swords circled and danced in midair, thick golden arcs crackling across their surfaces. Every pulse of lightning exploded with a thunderclap, and their momentum was terrifying beyond measure. Wherever the 9 swords flew, the void trembled violently, ripples visible to the naked eye spreading through the air. After Hanli advanced to the late Golden Immortal stage, the increase in immortal origin power within him had also increased the number of azure bamboo cloud swarm swords he could control. Now he could wield 9 at once. That alone increased his strength by no small amount. Hanli's hand shone with azure light as he controlled the 9 swords in a circling dance for a time before drawing them all back into the gourd. As for the miniature pavilion treasure, the spiritual power within it had also become somewhat more restrained, though perhaps because of the limitations of its material and grade. The changes were far less dramatic than those of the swords. After withdrawing the spell, Hanli rose to his feet and looked at the emerald gourd, excitement flashing in his eyes. The next moment, he tossed the gourd upward with one hand, then rapidly formed seals with both hands, sending one incantation after another into it. The green glow on the surface of the gourd immediately brightened, and the green runes spun faster and faster, becoming almost impossible to track. Go! With a sharp cry, crystal light blazed from between Hanli's brows, and a thick beam of crystalline radiance shot out and vanished into the gourd. Now that his cultivation had risen and the 4th layer of the spirit refinement technique had reached completion, his divine sense had become considerably stronger than before. He intended to try refining the treasure once more to see whether he could gain some new progress. After all, this gourd was a rare, profound heavenly treasure. There was no way its only ability was to purify the spiritual power within treasures. With that thought in mind, Hanli's 10 fingers moved like spinning wheels, and the surging immortal spiritual power within him followed the dazzling spell seals and rapidly seeped into the emerald gourd. At the same time, his divine sense spread out fully and reached deeper into the emerald space within the vessel. Not long after, Hanli's brows twitched. He discovered that this attempt to refine the gourd was much the same as before. As his power seeped inward, it soon met a dense resistance and came to a halt, unable to advance another inch. However, when his divine sense probed into the depths of the green vortex, although it encountered resistance as usual, that resistance was noticeably weaker than before. A look of excitement appeared on Hanli's face. He immediately circulated the spirit refinement technique, pouring a vast amount of divine sense into the emerald gourd and pressing deeper within. Though the progress was extremely slow, his divine sense continued moving forward. Every bit of ground gained required an enormous amount of divine sense, but Hanli had already made up his mind to see this through. Suddenly, the emerald gourd burst into a frenzy of green light, and powerful waves of law power spread from within it, stirring the surrounding baleful aura into turbulence once more. Hanli ignored the changes on the surface of the gourd completely. All his focus was fixed on his divine sense as it forced its way forward through the green vortex with everything it had. Time passed little by little, and in the blink of an eye, a full hour had gone by. Just as more than half the immense divine sense in Hanli's sea of consciousness had been consumed, a faint but crisp cracking sound rang out from within the gourd, as if some hidden bottleneck had been shattered. The divine sense that had been advancing with such difficulty suddenly relaxed, and Hanli felt a flash of green light around him. In the next instant, he had entered another emerald space. At the same time, the obstruction blocking his immortal spiritual power vanished, and that power now flowed smoothly into the deeper recesses of the gourd. The sensation filled Hanli with an indescribable sense of release from the depths of his being. The green light that had been flashing wildly on the gourd suddenly calmed, yet it now shone brighter than before. The runes on its surface also brightened several-fold and became much denser. Hanli did not dare relax. He carefully guided his immortal spiritual power further into the depths of the gourd, though most of his attention remained focused on his divine sense. The emerald space his divine sense had entered looked very similar to the first one, except that it was much larger. Yet this place was strangely empty. There was not a trace of green haze anywhere. Only a single emerald light sphere floated within it. That sphere hovered there in silence, giving off a faint green glow and flashing gently from time to time. It looked deeply mysterious. Hanli stared at the scene before him, his heart filling with curiosity. At once he began exploring this new space with his divine sense. He quickly examined the place thoroughly, But aside from that emerald sphere, there was nothing unusual to be found. His attention then returned to the sphere itself. After a moment of thought, he stretched his divine sense toward it. But the instant his divine sense touched the sphere, it flared with green light. Flame-like radiance rose from its surface. Then with a boom, a vast invisible force burst forth and sent his divine sense flying back violently. Hanli felt a wave of dizziness strike him. He hurriedly used the spirit refinement technique to steady himself before opening his eyes, astonishment written plainly across his face. Yet the next moment, he increased the strength of his divine sense and tried again. As before, the moment it touched the green sphere, it was blasted away with ease. This time he had been prepared, and his mind was not shaken as badly, but he was no less shocked. Over the next stretch of time, Hanli refused to give up. He repeatedly sent forth his divine sense, even using techniques such as the chain of divine thought, the thought sword art, and the prison of divine thought, all in an attempt to approach the green sphere. Without exception, every effort failed. He was thrown back every time. With no other choice, Hanli slowly withdrew his divine sense. Meanwhile, his immortal spiritual power had managed to seep a little farther into the emerald gourd before once again being stopped by an invisible force. Hanli looked at the gourd in front of him and smiled. Although he still had not uncovered its true mysteries, his control over it had silently grown far more natural than before. It was no longer like the old days when he could barely activate it. With that thought, he sent his divine sense back into the first emerald space and willed it to move. With a resonant hum, the green vortex immediately accelerated, and a bright green ray shot out, sweeping across a nearby cliff wall. A soft tearing sound rang out. A deep gouge appeared abruptly in the stone wall, and the section touched by the ray vanished without a trace, sucked directly into the gourd. Hanli nodded when he saw this. These stone walls had been immersed in dense baleful aura for countless years and had become incomparably tough, yet that green radiance had torn through them with ease. Its power was clearly no trivial matter. By making the green vortex spin faster, the gourd's ability to absorb objects had also become significantly stronger. The stones drawn into the gourd appeared at the center of the green vortex. Swept by the surrounding green haze, they softened like mud and fused together into a single black stone sphere. Hanli continued accelerating the vortex. The faster it spun, the denser the green light the gourd emitted became. A thick green radiance swept across the bottom of the abyss in all directions. Wherever it passed, everything was torn apart and drawn into the gourd. At last Hanli halted the gourd's operation, and his face turned pale. Driving this profound heavenly treasure consumed an astonishing amount of immortal spiritual power. In only that brief span of time, more than half the vast reserves within him had already been depleted. He took out a pill and swallowed it, then closed his eyes to regulate his breathing. Only after quite a while did the color gradually return to his face. The moment he recovered, his divine sense eagerly entered the first space inside the emerald gourd once more. The green vortex there had already calmed down and was turning slowly again. Unlike before, when he could not truly control it, now he could fully direct its rotation however he wished. As Hanli watched the spinning vortex, a thought suddenly rose in his mind for no apparent reason. At once he acted on it. The slowly rotating green vortex abruptly came to a stop. Then it began spinning again, but in the opposite direction. As it reversed, its original emerald color suddenly deepened into a dark green, and the force of absorption and collection that had once filled it was transformed into a powerful expelling force that wrapped around the black stone sphere at its center. Bright green light erupted from the stone sphere, and then with a sharp sound it vanished. In the next instant, a blurred green streak shot out from the emerald gourd and slammed into the cliff wall. The mountain wall and even the ground shook violently, like an earthquake, before swiftly growing still again. Hanli lifted his head and looked forward. A round hole the size of a millstone had appeared in the cliff wall. Its edges were incredibly smooth, yet its interior was pitch black and bottomless. He sent his divine sense inside and could not help but show a stunned expression. That black tunnel extended straight through the earth for hundreds of miles. Hanli stared at the emerald gourd in his hand, half shocked and half delighted. So the gourd possessed this ability to eject things in reverse as well. Even an ordinary stone sphere could unleash such horrifying destructive force. If what it had fired just now had not been a simple stone sphere but a spirit treasure flying sword, or even an immortal treasure flying sword, then how powerful would the attack have been? At the thought, Han Li's heart surged with excitement. After restoring himself somewhat with pills and immortal essence stones, his divine sense entered the emerald gourd once again. When the stone sphere had been expelled earlier, his divine sense had also been blasted out along with it. Inside the emerald space, the green vortex had already returned to its former state, turning slowly in its normal direction. At the center of the vortex still floated the set of azure bamboo cloudswarm swords and the miniature pavilion. With a thought, Han Li moved the other swords in the pavilion aside, leaving only one azure bamboo cloudswarm sword hovering at the center of the vortex. At his command, the emerald vortex reversed again, turning dark green. That powerful expelling force emerged once more and wrapped around the sword. The azure bamboo cloudswarm sword was instantly enveloped in blinding green light and began trembling violently, on the verge of firing out. A sharp glint flashed through Han Li's eyes. Rather than releasing the expelling force, he suppressed it with all his might, while bright azure light burst from his body. As time passed, his face grew paler and his body began to tremble slightly. It was obvious that he had pushed his immortal spiritual power to its absolute limit. As the reversed vortex spun faster and faster, the expelling force also grew more and more terrifying. It surged through the green space, rumbling like a volcano on the verge of eruption. Seeing this, Han Li inwardly rejoiced. His guess had indeed been correct. The reverse rotation kept accelerating, but eventually Han Li reached the point where he could no longer sustain it. Go! No longer forcing himself, Han Li's eyes flashed with sharp light as he released the expelling force. The emerald gourd trembled faintly, and the space ahead of it rippled slightly. Blue light flickered in Han Li's eyes as he pushed his spirit-clearing eyes to their utmost, and only then did he barely make out a nearly invisible green sword shadow. The green sword shadow flashed once and vanished straight into the stone wall ahead. Almost at the same instant, thousands of miles away, a faint sound came from the surface as a blurred green streak burst out from underground. The green sword shadow had pierced through thousands of miles of earth. Though its speed had decreased somewhat, it was still as fast as lightning as it shot into the sky and disappeared at the horizon in a single flash. Where it passed, an extremely fine spatial crack appeared in the void. At the bottom of the abyss, Han Li stood there dumbfounded. Only after a good while did he let out a slow breath. His face was pale as paper, but his eyes were filled with astonished joy. Using the gourd's reverse expelling force to launch the azure bamboo cloudswarm sword had produced power this terrifying. In an instant it had pierced through thousands of miles of earth and even sliced open space itself. Some of Han Li's strongest attacks could shake the void, but never once had they torn it open. Yet this emerald gourd had managed exactly that. The result left him deeply shaken. And the speed of that sword shadow just now could not even be described as lightning fast. It far surpassed every attack Han Li himself possessed. He judged that at close range, even a great cultivator would find it almost impossible to evade. Thinking of this, Han Li quickly took out Immortal Essence Stones to recover while flicking one hand through the air to cast a spell. A moment later, an azure sword shadow shot down from above the abyss and landed in his hand. It was the same azure bamboo cloudswarm sword. Han Li inspected it carefully and only after confirming that it had not been damaged did he wave his hand and store it back inside the gourd. More than 10 days passed in the blink of an eye. On that day, a mass of golden light shot in from the distance at astonishing speed and appeared near the abyss in an instant. The light flashed, revealing the enormous form of the golden beetle, vicious light flickering in its eyes. It was the great e-gold devouring immortal. A vast aura erupted from its body. All demon beasts within tens of thousands of miles sensed that presence and fled their lairs in panic, racing into the distance. Even the great E-tree demon near the abyss was jolted awake in alarm, and looked warily at the golden beetle in midair. "If you do not wish to die, then get the hell away from here," the gold-devouring immortal snapped, sweeping a glance over the tree demon before ignoring it and turning its gaze toward the abyss itself. Anger flashed in the tree demon's eyes, but it did not dare act. Green light rippled over its body, and its enormous roots tore free from the earth along with huge clumps of soil before it fled into the distance with all speed. The gold-devouring immortal paid it no further attention. Its gaze remained fixed on the abyss. Dense baleful aura was pouring from within it in wave after wave. Even it felt some wariness toward that aura, and when it tried to probe downward with divine sense, the dense evil mists quickly blocked it. It could not investigate the interior at all. Golden light flickered in its eyes. Then its huge body suddenly transformed into a mass of golden radiance and flew downward. But the instant it entered the abyss, rolling thunder-like booms erupted all around the chasm, and one thick black pillar of light after another appeared, shooting into the heavens. Every one of those pillars released terrifying spiritual fluctuations. They were the heaven-subduing formation. The black pillars resonated with one another, and in an instant countless black runes flew out from them, winding and swirling through the air. Then all the runes exploded at once. Clusters of jet-black light emerged and linked the pillars together, forming an immense black sea of light that covered the entire abyss, trapping the gold-devouring immortal inside. At that same moment, the figure of a middle-aged man in a yellow robe flashed into existence beside the black sea of light. He chanted under his breath while casting one spell seal after another. It was Xiedauren. The black sea of light surged violently, and countless black tendrils emerged like enormous tentacles, shooting in from every direction and wrapping themselves around the gold-devouring immortal. Each band of black light shimmered with tiny runes and radiated a powerful sealing force. Petty tricks! The gold-devouring immortal snorted coldly and slashed both forelegs outward. Its huge body exploded with golden radiance, and streak after streak of razor-sharp golden light shot in all directions, instantly tearing apart most of the black bands wrapped around it. At the same time, it twisted and heaved with its immense body, snapping the rest of the restraints apart. Golden light blazed from its forelegs as it slashed to either side. With a deafening roar, two enormous golden blades shot out and chopped into the black sea of light. A rapid string of cracking sounds immediately rang out from deep within the black light sea. The entire formation churned violently and dimmed at once, seeming on the verge of collapse. Just then, a piercing shriek rang out from the depths of the black sea, followed by two muffled explosions. Two bursts of golden light flared faintly, then dimmed. The gold-devouring immortal's expression shifted slightly. It seemed that the attacks it had just unleashed had actually been blocked head-on. The raging black sea of light stabilized and quickly brightened once again. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. More than a dozen massive black pythons suddenly shot out from deep within the sea of light. Each was hundreds of yards long, mouths gaping wide as they lunged toward the gold-devouring immortal. The gold-devouring immortal's eyes turned cold, and one of its forelegs flashed with golden light as it slashed forward. At once, 10,000 streaks of golden light burst from its body, several times brighter than before. They rapidly condensed into hundreds upon hundreds of golden beetle phantoms, each of which rushed toward the black pythons. A continuous string of thunderous explosions rang out. Golden light and black shadows collided and exploded together. The dozen giant pythons were torn apart in a single exchange, dissolving into bursts of black radiance. The gold-devouring immortal slashed out with its foreleg again. The golden beetles flared once more, then flew together and transformed into enormous golden sword shadows, which hacked toward the surrounding black sea of light. A crushing pressure erupted from those golden swords, causing the nearby black sea of light to ripple violently. But just then countless black runes surged from the depths of the sea, releasing waves of powerful law energy. The black radiance left behind by the shattered pythons suddenly gathered together in one place, and instantly transformed into enormous black rings. With a flash of black light, those rings appeared out of nowhere around the golden sword shadows and bound them in place. The golden swords froze at once, suspended in midair, unable to fall. When the gold-devouring immortal saw this, it threw back its head and roared. It had clearly been enraged for real now. It raised both forelegs toward the sky, and substantial golden light poured from its body, mixed with layers of golden runes. Spinning in the air, they condensed into a golden sphere hundreds of yards wide. Blinding golden radiance burst from the sphere like a miniature sun. The black sea of light within several hundred yards was instantly forced back, creating a vacuum-like zone around it. Then the gold-devouring immortal swung both forelegs down. The sun-like sphere shot forward and crashed heavily into the black sea of light. The golden sphere exploded at once. With a world-shaking roar, A storm of golden force burst outward like a tidal wave, smashing through the nearby black sea of light as though it were dry weeds and rotten wood. Without slowing, it continued sweeping in all directions with even fiercer momentum, tearing apart everything in its path. The black sea of light shook wildly, then erupted with a series of thunderous explosions and shattered completely, dissolving into countless black motes that drifted away and vanished. The scene before the gold-devouring immortal's eyes blurred, and it found itself once more at the entrance to the abyss. At the same moment, a golden figure was sent reeling backward as though struck by a heavy blow. It was Xiaodaoren. His face was deathly pale, his robe was torn to shreds, and both his chest and lower abdomen had been ripped open by large wounds. He was clearly badly injured. After being blasted back more than 1,000 yards, golden lightning suddenly erupted from his body. Borrowing that recoil force, he transformed into a streak of golden light and fled into the distance without looking back even once. Seeing the crab Taoist flee into the distance, the Tai stage gold-devouring immortal did not pursue. Its enormous body hovered outside the abyss as it stared down at the surging waves of baleful energy rising from below, and a flicker of hesitation passed through its eyes. How was that grand spring and autumn dream you've been having every 20 years? Ha 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 ha. At that moment, a voice suddenly rang out from the bottom of the abyss, deep and resonant like a great bell, rolling upward through the chasm. Han Li's words struck the creature exactly where it hurt. Rage flared in the gold-devouring immortal's eyes, yet it still did not move. You want to eat this fairy girl? Aren't you afraid you'll choke to death? If you've got the guts, come try it. I'll be waiting for you right here. Right after that, Jin Tong's voice rose from the depths as well, adding fuel to the fire. The gold-devouring immortal was instantly provoked beyond endurance. Golden light burst all over its body, jagged patterns appearing along its edges until it looked as though it were wrapped in burning gold flames. A layer of golden markings rippled across its body, and its vast form rapidly shrank until it was less than 100 zhang tall. As it became smaller, the golden flames surrounding it grew denser and more solid, like a blazing cloak wrapped tightly around its frame. Then the Tai gold-devouring immortal dove straight down into the heavy baleful mist filling the abyss. Protected by that fiery mantle, the baleful energy parted around it and was pushed several zhang away. Even so, revulsion still filled its eyes. It clearly hated the abyssal miasma. As it descended, it moved far faster than Han Li had back when he had pushed himself to the limit little by little, testing his way downward in stages. Before long, it saw Han Li and Jin Tong standing at the bottom of the abyss. Its gaze shifted, and a trace of confusion appeared in its eyes. In barely 20 years, both the human man and that young one of its own kind had advanced noticeably in cultivation. That was anything but normal. For some reason, even with its late Tai cultivation, a faint sense of warning rose in its heart. It did not recklessly continue its descent, but instead stopped in midair and carefully surveyed the valley floor. At a glance, it noticed that in several places where the baleful energy was especially dense, things had been deliberately hidden away. From within them came faint, almost undetectable fluctuations of spiritual power. It seemed some kind of formation had been laid out there. Mockery flashed through its eyes. Suddenly it opened its mouth and spat out a golden tornado, which roared toward the depths of the valley floor. Where the gale passed, the baleful energy and sand were swept up into the storm, along with tiny glittering points of light, and forced toward the mountain walls on either side. Circular stone platforms and triangular black banners were immediately exposed across the ground. Under the blast of the hurricane, the stone platforms and black banners were blown askew. They were torn from their original positions in the formation and hurled against the stone walls of the abyss. In an instant, the great array lost its effect. So this was your arrangement? The gold-devouring immortal asked in human speech. Below, Han Li and Jin Tong remained silent. When no one answered, the gold-devouring immortal almost laughed at itself. Had it really been worried that a newly advanced early Tai whelp and a mere peak golden immortal human could use any method worthy of its caution? Little one, you and I were one body to begin with. Once you merge into me, you'll realize that all these years of chasing and fighting meant nothing at all. Since that is the case, why not surrender now? The Tai gold-devouring immortal said. Pa, if that's how you see it, Then why don't you obediently let me eat you and merge into my body instead? Wouldn't that still be becoming one? Jintong spat and shot back. We may share the same origin, but our minds and realms are different. My cultivation surpasses yours by far, so devouring you would be effortless. But if you wanted to devour me, that would be another matter. Besides, with your childish mind, sooner or later you'd only be swallowed by some other fully matured one. Why not merge with me now? I might even choose to preserve a little of your memory. To be honest, seeing you step into the early Tai realm actually pleased me somewhat from the bottom of my heart. At this moment, the Tai gold-devouring immortal had lost its earlier impatience and fury, and its tone turned slow and measured. Hanli had not spoken at all until now. Only after hearing this did he finally say, as far as temperament goes, Jintong is far better as she is now. If you want to devour her, you'll have to ask me, her master, first. A mere human at the golden immortal realm dares to call himself the master of one of our kind? You truly deserve death. The Tai gold-devouring immortal roared. Its two forelimbs crossed and slashed outward. At once, two crescent-shaped rays of crystal light shot toward Hanli. Those rays looked no different from the ones Jintong used, but they moved several times faster, reaching Hanli in almost the blink of an eye. Hanli felt his breathing seize as an invisible force rushed toward him. Fortunately, he had prepared for this. Golden light blazed around him, the mantra-treasured wheel in his body reversed, and his figure blurred as he vanished to one side with Jintong. At the same time, he flicked his wrist, and two streaks of black and white light shot forth toward the gold-devouring immortal. The white treasure was familiar to it. It was the white jade paperweight Hanli had used once before. After being knocked back by it last time, it had already been badly damaged, yet Hanli had brought it out again. With a whistling roar, the end of the paperweight carved with a savage lion's head expanded at once, turning into a snow-white humpback ridge covered in cracks, pressing down on the creature from above. The black object was a rectangular inkstone. It flew toward the ground beneath the gold-devouring immortal, and the instant it landed, it transformed with a violent surge into a sea of pitch-black fire, its scorching waves rushing toward the creature. Both treasures had come from Feng Tiandu's hand, and both had once been formidable immortal artifacts. But against the gold-devouring immortal, they were clearly lacking. The creature gave a cold snort and drew one forelimb upward. A streak of crystal light shot forth and struck the white hump. With a thunderous boom, the white hump split apart down the middle. Its light dispersed, and it fell back to the ground as two broken pieces of the paperweight. Then the gold-devouring immortal opened its mouth and inhaled sharply. The sea of black fire instantly condensed into a spiraling wave like a whirlpool and was sucked into its belly in one breath, not a trace left behind. At that very moment the situation changed. From the ground that had previously been hidden beneath the black flames, white jade pillars inscribed with all kinds of runes suddenly rose one after another, converging into a gigantic white stone array that shone with brilliant light and surged toward the gold-devouring immortal. At the same time, dazzling silver radiance lit up both mountain walls. For stone-carved runes, each more than 100 zhang long, passed straight through the walls and transformed into four massive runic projections that descended over the creature's head. These four were none other than the four symbols rune array. The azure dragonwood sealing rune, the white tiger metal blazing rune, the vermilion bright flame-raising rune, and the true martial water-repelling rune. Hanli had used the four talismans he had once obtained from the eightfold treasure casket as their foundation, pouring a vast amount of immortal spiritual power into carving them upon the stone walls. As dragon roars and tiger howls echoed out, an azure flood dragon swooped down, a white giant tiger pounced, a crimson flame bird flew in, and a heavily armored black tortoise crashed forward, hemming in the gold-devouring immortal from all four directions. Lowly insect! Petty tricks! The gold-devouring immortal shouted in fury. Crystal light burst around it, and countless translucent blades as thin as knives shot out in dense swarms, almost instantly riddling the array below with holes until it looked like a sieve. The four beasts descending from above fared no better. They could not withstand the crystal blades at all. In just a few exchanges, their spiritual force thinned and they dissolved into four wisps of smoke. But before it could even pause to breathe, a massive shadow fell from above and transformed into an enormous 3-story pavilion, swallowing it whole. Inside the pavilion, everything gleamed in gold and jade. Sacred chants echoed through the halls, and strange waves of sound drifted through the air, making the gold-devouring immortal suddenly feel light and dazed. In that instant of confusion, it seemed to return once more to the dream realm where it had once been trapped, endlessly hunting Jin Tong again and again. A beast-like shriek burst from its mouth, and a tremendous sound wave exploded outward, shattering all the chanting inside the pavilion in an instant. Dense cracks immediately spread across the pavilion as well. Watching this, Han Li's eyes flickered. After 20 years of torment inside the illusion, the gold-devouring immortal's spiritual sense seemed to have grown even stronger. By his original estimate, the 3-story pavilion, tempered for a time inside the green gourd, should have been able to trap the creature for about 10 breaths, giving him enough time to use the mantra-treasured wheel. But the truth was far harsher. Could not even hold for 3 breaths. With a deafening crash, the pavilion shattered into countless fragments and scattered apart. At the same time, Han Li shouted, "Fellow Taoist Demo Guang, if you won't act now, then when?" The instant his words fell, a black figure wrapped in rolling baleful energy flashed into view behind the gold-devouring immortal. With both hands gripping a dark ancient spear, it thrust straight toward the creature's back. That figure was naturally Emo Guang, now inhabiting the body of the gray immortal corpse. By some secret method, the aura radiating from him at this moment had astonishingly reached early Tai. Black light exploded from the spear, while the bloodstain on its tip released threads of crimson radiance that coiled around the point and formed lotus-like spear shadows, letting out shrill, chilling cries. As the spear shaft trembled, the streaks of light danced like a swimming dragon, carrying a murderous force so intense that its displayed power was dozens of times greater than when Han Li had tested it before. The Tai gold-devouring immortal had long sensed the attack, yet it did not dodge at all. Instead, it raised both forelimbs to meet the black spear head-on. The difference in size between them was immense, but the force each carried was formidable. It was like an iron pestle striking the point of a needle. They collided with explosive violence. A shockwave of terrifying force erupted from the point where Emo Guang and the gold-devouring immortal clashed, spreading outward as an invisible wave that shook the mountain walls and sent rocks crashing down. The black spear bent sharply before snapping back, launching both itself and Emo Guang's body up toward the top of the abyss. As Han Li watched Emo Guang's figure fly backward into the rolling baleful mist, his heart tightened. If Emo Guang had not occupied the unfathomably sturdy gray immortal body, that force would have reduced him to shattered flesh long ago. And without Emo Guang, Han Li himself would not have been able to endure even half a move from the enemy. The gold-devouring immortal's body was also forced downward for the first time by that tremendous impact. At that very instant, a golden radiance that had been prepared long ago suddenly blazed to life. A gigantic golden treasure wheel appeared, 18 crystalline threads sinking into its body, while more than 400 time Tao markings shone brilliantly across it. Under the impact of wave after wave of golden light, a vast golden space formed at once and enveloped the gold-devouring immortal. The Tai gold-devouring immortal suddenly felt its vision blur. Its entire body seemed to sink into mud, growing hard to move. It wanted to release crystal light and smash the great golden wheel to powder, but the immortal spiritual power inside its body seemed frozen solid. Its flow slowed to nearly nothing, and even gathering it became unimaginably difficult. Golden light flashed wildly over its body as it struggled with all the strength it could still command, trying to break free from the mantra-treasured wheel's restraint. As powerful waves rippled from its body and crashed against the surrounding golden ripples, the space formed by the treasure wheel actually began to tremble. Even so, there was no sign of it collapsing just yet. Seeing this, Han Li's pupils contracted slightly, and inwardly he felt a trace of relief. If he had not fortunately broken through to the peak of the golden immortal realm earlier, he might not have been able to trap this gold-devouring immortal at all. Even as that thought crossed his mind, he did not dare relax in the slightest. His hands formed seals rapidly as he poured all his power into driving the mantra-treasured wheel, forcing the space to hold the creature fast. He knew very well that he could not trap it for long. Once it broke free, the consequences would be unimaginable. With that in mind, he waved one hand, and a burst of green light flashed forth. A green jade gourd appeared, hovering in midair and trembling violently. Tiny runes all over it flickered fiercely, while a brilliant light erupted from its mouth. A sharp restrained force was hidden within, on the verge of breaking out. Hanli had to devote all his strength to controlling the mantra-treasured wheel, while also splitting his focus to control the green jade gourd. The drain on both his immortal spiritual power and his spiritual sense had already reached a level beyond ordinary imagination. He drew in a breath, let out a low shout, formed a sword seal with his hand, and pointed sharply forward. Cut! At his command, the green light at the mouth of the gourd flared to its brightest point, while thunder-like crackling sounds burst from within. One after another, green bamboo cloud-swarm swords flashed out from the mouth of the gourd, each one wrapped in golden lightning. Within the gleaming green light, 8 flying swords shot straight toward the heart of the Tai gold-devouring immortal. Sharp ringing sounds exploded one after another, mixed with crackling bursts of lightning. To preserve the full power of each strike, Hanli did not split them into sword light or phantom projections. He attacked only with the actual sword bodies themselves. Empowered by the time spirit domain, the swords hacked down at astonishing speed. In only a few breaths they had struck hundreds of times, yet at the creature's chest, only rings of golden light rippled out. It had suffered almost no real damage. Go on, keep chopping. The moment I break free of this restraint will be the moment you are ground into dust and your bones reduced to ash. Ha ha ha. The Tai gold-devouring immortal struggled violently, yet its laughter rang out in savage triumph. Jean Tong watched with bloodshot eyes, filled with bitter regret. If only she had cultivated more diligently when she had followed Chu Ling back then, perhaps she would not be so powerless now. While she frantically searched her mind for any way to break through the creature's defense, a sudden change came over Hanli. Golden light exploded from his body. The immortal spiritual power he had already spent so much of was now pushed to the absolute limit, as though he were holding nothing back and preparing to pour it all out like a flood. At the same time, the runes on the surface of the green jade gourd brightened to the utmost, and at the mouth of the gourd, the tip of a sword wrapped in green light emerged first. Inside the gourd, a green vortex was spinning at terrifying speed, and deep booming sounds rose from within it. A force so frightening it could shake the heart had gathered there, like a volcano on the verge of eruption. Go! Hanli roared. The green jade gourd trembled violently. The space in front of its mouth rippled, and the sword tip protruding from it vanished in an instant. Almost at the same moment, a nearly blurred green sword shadow appeared at the gold-devouring immortal's chest and drove straight down. A deafening metallic blast rang out. The creature's body shuddered violently as golden light mixed with golden lightning and layers of sword chi exploded outward, sending endless waves of force crashing in all directions. The thick baleful energy was torn apart by the gale, scattering upward through the abyss. The cliffs on both sides and the valley floor were carved to pieces by the sword chi riding that wind, leaving behind enormous trenches 100 zhang deep. At the creature's chest, layer after layer of golden light cracked apart. At last, on the incomparably hard shell, a thin fissure appeared, so fine it was almost no thicker than a strand of hair. The moment the Tai gold-devouring immortal realized its defense had been pierced, its eyes narrowed, and it struggled even more violently. The mantra-treasured will hovering nearby shook wildly and grew unstable, on the verge of breaking out of control. Hanli's eyes flickered. There was regret in his heart but not surprise. In terms of pure power, this green bamboo cloudswarm sword, the one that had been refined inside the green jade gourd for the longest time, had already exceeded his expectations. If that sword from the gourd had struck not this late Tai gold-devouring immortal, but any other ordinary jade immortal, even one at Tai peak, it would never have received such a minor wound. Without hesitating, Hanli changed the seal in his hand. The remaining 8 flying swords immediately streaked through the air, and gathered around that green bamboo cloudswarm sword. Their light connected, lightning threads intertwined, and in an instant they fused into one. Hanli shot forward. No longer did he control the sword with divine sense. Instead, he grabbed that 9-in-1 green bamboo cloudswarm sword with his own hand and charged straight at the Tai gold-devouring immortal. You seek death! It bellowed in uncontrollable rage. Hanli ignored it. Wrapped in blazing golden light, he closed in and raised the sword in both hands, chopping down at the thin wound on its chest. In that moment there was no need to conserve immortal spiritual power. No need to conserve evil smiting divine lightning. No need to conserve the eternal sword chi. The first strike landed with a heavy blast. Han Li's body flipped through the air like a hawk wheeling over, and the second strike followed immediately. Then the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth. Again and again, endlessly without pause. Each strike came faster than the last, stronger than the last. Before one surge of evil smiting divine lightning could fully erupt, the next strike forced it back down. Before one wave of eternal sword chi could spread out, the next blow crushed it back into the wound. Strands of golden lightning, layers of sword chi, gathered without end and pressed harder and harder, all accumulating at the wound on the creature's chest like a volcano waiting to erupt. Mo Guang, who had already returned to the abyss, did not approach at once. Watching from afar, he immediately understood Han Li's intention, and his eyes narrowed. By then, the Tai gold-devouring immortal had already lost the calm it once held. It could clearly feel the terrifying threat building in those sword strikes. Its wings trembled violently as layers of crystal light flashed and slammed again and again against the mantra-treasured wheel. As the treasure wheel continued to be consumed, its power weakened little by little. It could still slow the creature's attacks, but no longer completely neutralize them. The wheel itself, along with the time Tao markings upon it, trembled violently under the impact. Han Li's spiritual sense had been worn down to the brink. His eyes were bloodshot, and blood trickled from both ears in winding lines down his cheeks like two tiny crimson snakes. Yet the hands gripping his sword remained unbelievably steady. He kept striking again and again. 359 strikes. 360. He kept chopping, one strike after another, but the wound never widened. 361. At last, the evil smiting divine lightning that had been forced down again and again could no longer be suppressed. The eternal sword chi that had been restrained at every turn finally broke loose as well. A world-shaking explosion erupted. A sea of golden thunder no less vast than the lightning pools of the highest heavens burst outward. Countless arcs of golden electricity flew everywhere, forming a lightning vortex that completely engulfed the gold-devouring immortal. At the same time, the endless sword chi condensed into one point and exploded inside the creature's chest and abdomen. Golden lightning and snow-white sword chi twisted together into a colossal golden pillar coiled with a white dragon, blasting upward and almost piercing through the entire abyss. The Tai gold-devouring immortal let out a shrill, agonized howl, its savage nature driven to the extreme. Its wings exploded apart with a thunderous blast, and a violent shockwave burst from them, instantly knocking away the already overburdened mantra-treasured wheel, and breaking its control in a single moment. So you truly could break my defense. Today you will die without question. Lowering its head to glance at the long, deep wound at its chest, it burned with fury. With a body as powerful as its own, even if someone broke through its flesh, the wound should have healed within a few breaths. But this time it was wrong. From the moment the wound had appeared, it had shown no sign of closing. Threads of lightning and wild sword chi still clung to it, slowing the healing. Seeing this, Han Li sighed inwardly. All the careful planning and effort he had poured into this chain of attacks had only managed to break through the outer shell. He still had not struck a true vital point. And then without warning everything changed again. The Tai gold-devouring immortal opened its mouth and spat out a ray of crystal light, the size of an ordinary spear. It flashed with five-colored brilliance as it shot straight toward Han Li's heart. Han Li's pupils contracted. He instantly summoned the mantra-treasured wheel back to his side, intending to slow the attack. But the moment the wheel returned he realized something was wrong. The Tao markings on the wheel were trembling violently. Yet the golden ripples that should have slowed everything never appeared. Before he could understand what had happened, the five-colored crystal spear was already upon him. There was no way to evade it. At the very brink of disaster, a blur suddenly flashed in front of him. Jean Tong, moving so fast she did not even reveal her true form, threw herself in front of him. With a wet sound, the five-colored spear pierced straight through her shoulder. Carrying her body with it, it slammed violently into Han Li, the collision accompanied by the crack of bones breaking and a spray of blood. Both of them were hurled into the stone wall behind them. The impact shook the abyss, and the cliff face collapsed as enormous boulders came crashing down. Within the dust, blood running from the corner of his mouth, Han Li clutched Jean Tong in his arms. His body flashed and instantly darted toward Emo Guang. Emo Guang's gaze shifted, and he moved to stand in front of them. As Han Li drew the mantra-treasured will back into his body, he looked down at Jin Tong. Her aura had weakened sharply, but her life was not in danger. Only then did he let out a breath, though fear still lingered in his heart. Jin Tong had now stepped into the Tai realm. On top of that, she had previously devoured that strange pill furnace and the giant rat's remains, which had strengthened her body far beyond what it used to be. That was the only reason she had been able to endure the blow of that 5-colored crystal spear. Otherwise, even with her risking her life to shield him, Han Li would still have ended up with his heart pierced through. "Are you all right?" Han Li asked without taking his eyes off the gold-devouring immortal. "I'm fine. Uncle, we have to kill him this time." Jin Tong shook her head lightly, pulled the 5-colored crystal spear from her shoulder with one hand, stuffed it into her mouth, then sat up straight, her gaze unwavering. Han Li acted as if he had not even heard her words. All his focus was fixed on the gold-devouring immortal, a little more than 100 zhang away. At that moment, though its wings had clearly been shattered, streams of 5-colored fire suddenly burst from its back and formed 2 enormous radiant wings. With a single flap, its body vanished from where it had been. Han Li's pupils shrank sharply. With one hand he flung Jin Tong far into the distance, and with the other he raised the green bamboo cloudswarm sword before himself to block. In front of him, Emo Guang's body suddenly rose several zhang taller. Dense black light flared around him as he held the black spear and thrust forward with a flourish. A black line flashed and vanished, and boundless black chi surged forth like a flood. A tremendous metallic crash rang out. The gold-devouring immortal's huge body suddenly reappeared. The golden armor on its chest blocked the black spear, while its 2 forelimbs like steel lances slipped past Emo Guang and stabbed toward Han Li behind him. What looked slow to the eye had in fact happened in a single instant. Han Li had only just raised the green bamboo cloudswarm sword when the 2 steel lances were already thrusting toward him. Heaven and earth overturned. A furious shout rang out almost at the same time. In the abyss, baleful energy surged backward. Heaven and earth changed color. The gold-devouring immortal felt an indescribable terrifying force sweep through the abyss and envelop the entire space. Its vision blurred, and when it looked again, it found the entire world inside the abyss had turned upside down. A moment ago it had clearly been hanging in the air, but now it was falling toward the valley floor. An illusion? Shock flashed through its mind, and the forelimbs it had thrust forward halted for the briefest instant. "Thunder rising from dry land!" Another shout followed. As the words fell, the ground of the abyss valley floor suddenly split apart, and a massive golden pillar of lightning erupted from below, surging upward like tidal waves in an endless river. In an instant it swallowed the gold-devouring immortal whole. The violent lightning struck its body with roaring detonations. Arcs of electricity leapt wildly in every direction. This was clearly no illusion. No! A light flashed in the creature's eyes. It opened its huge mouth and unleashed a blast of 5-colored crystal light toward the valley floor. With a tremendous explosion, the entire valley floor shattered apart. Yet no earth or stone flew out. Only rolling baleful energy churned violently and scattered in all directions. A golden figure wielding a black battle blade engraved with thundercloud patterns flashed once through the tide of baleful mist, then vanished. So heaven and earth had never truly been reversed at all. The valley floor had actually been the empty air above. That thunder rising from dry land had merely been the crab Taoist striking with the thunder-slaying blade. By the time the gold-devouring immortal realized this and turned back toward Han Li's position, it found Han Li standing there with his eyes shut, one finger raised toward it, softly uttering a single word. "Still." The next moment a black chain cage, barely visible before him, suddenly flared with light and transformed into several crystalline chains. Then they all vanished into the void. Immediately after that, the Tai gold-devouring immortal's body shuddered and froze in midair. Deep within its sea of consciousness, in a golden space, floated a soul shaped like a golden beetle. Around it hung a cage formed from glittering chains. Faint black runes were carved into the chain cage. Amid the dazzling crystal light they emitted, traces of dark radiance flickered, crystal glow and black light intertwining into something impossible to describe. The imprisoned beetle's soul was clearly furious beyond measure. It flew wildly up and down inside the cage, slamming against it with all its strength, while the golden tides filling the sea of consciousness seemed to answer its rage, crashing against the chain cage like monstrous waves against a shore. But no matter how violently it struggled, the cage remained as immovable as a mountain. In the abyss, Han Li let out a slow breath, but his expression remained grave, not daring to relax for even an instant. With the aid of the power of law manifesting speech and the crab Taoist's cover, he had taken the chance to trap the gold-devouring immortal with the cage of divine sense. But the creature was still a late-Tai gold-devouring immortal. The strength of its soul far exceeded his expectations. Even with how powerful Han Li's spiritual sense now was, he knew he would not be able to hold on for long. Jin Tong now? Han Li roared. Jin Tong had already understood. Enduring the pain of her injuries, she flashed with golden light and transformed into a golden beetle the size of a water vat. She traced a golden arc through the air and rushed straight to the wound in the gold-devouring immortal's chest and abdomen, then with a swift motion drilled straight inside. The instant she entered its body, she opened her mouth wide and began tearing into its flesh. The sounds of flesh being ripped apart and devoured echoed one after another, enough to make anyone's scalp go numb. Jin Tong's body was smeared with blood now, a terrifying sight. Yet with every mouthful she swallowed, a little more strength grew inside her, and even the wound in her shoulder left by the five-colored crystal spear began to heal bit by bit. Though the Tai gold-devouring immortal's soul was imprisoned, great waves of pain still surged through its body, making it tremble violently. Inside its sea of consciousness, its soul had already gone completely berserk. It rammed itself against the cage of divine sense with utter disregard for damage to itself. Han Li felt his own sea of consciousness shudder. His face turned white, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. But then he immediately formed seals before him with both hands and pushed the spirit refinement art into frenzied motion, holding nothing back. Using the cage of divine sense already consumed an enormous amount of spiritual power. With the enemy struggling like this, Han Li's expenditure of spiritual sense to stabilize the cage now poured away like a river in flood. Before long, sweat was pouring from both sides of his forehead. His clothes were soaked through, his brow knotted tightly, and his teeth clenched so hard they ground audibly. He had even withdrawn both the green bamboo cloudswarm sword and the green jade gourd, not daring to split his focus in the slightest as he held on with desperate effort. As time passed little by little, Jin Tong rapidly devoured the flesh within the gold-devouring immortal's body. Her aura also began to rise bit by bit, but the gap between her and the gold-devouring immortal was still immense. About a quarter of an hour passed. Han Li, suspended in midair, looked as though he had just been dragged out of a pond. His whole body was soaked in sweat, his face ghastly pale. The bright vigor that once filled his eyes had dimmed greatly. At last he had reached the end. His spiritual sense was exhausted. Inside the gold-devouring immortal's sea of consciousness, the cage of divine sense, constantly battered by the golden tides, now looked as though it had rusted over. Its glow had faded to the brink of extinction. The golden beetle trapped inside launched one final charge at the cage. At the same time, the golden tides in the sea of consciousness surged up in towering waves and crashed down. With a loud shattering sound, the cage of divine sense finally gave way. It broke into countless points of light and vanished. The gold-devouring immortal's divine sense returned, and with its freedom restored it let out a shrill howl that made the very space at the bottom of the abyss quake. While its soul had been trapped, most of its perception had been cut off. That had also dulled the agonizing pain of Jin Tong feeding inside it. But now its senses returned, and that bone-eating torment came crashing over it like a mountain avalanche. Even it could barely endure the pain. Your time to die has come. Its eyes flashed. Golden light shuddered chaotically over its body, and its bones crackled one after another. The muscles and bones inside its body began to contract at the same time, crushing inward toward Jin Tong. At the same time, the immortal spiritual power that had been scattered throughout its body began to gather and surge back in a reversing torrent, all of it rushing toward Jin Tong. Jin Tong had been chewing her way toward the vital organs of the Tai stage gold-devouring immortal, devouring everything in her path. She was already drenched red with blood, and strips of raw flesh hung between her teeth, making her look savage beyond words. Just as she was about to bite through a layer of sinewy membrane and enter the creature's abdominal cavity, the surrounding flesh suddenly seemed to come alive. It pressed in on her from all sides, carrying wave after wave of powerful immortal energy, trying to pin her in place. But after consuming so much flesh, Jin Tong's aura had already risen to the point where it was pressing close to the mid-tai stage. Brilliant golden light burst from her body, and sharp fang-like beams jutted out from her skin, forcing the squeezing flesh back. With one savage bite, she tore straight through the membrane. Her body tipped forward, and she dropped directly into the belly of the gold-devouring immortal. The Tai stage gold-devouring immortal was furious, yet helpless. Jin Tong was causing havoc inside its body, and with every movement constrained, it could not unleash any truly powerful attack. Ordinarily, letting Jin Tong into its belly would not have been a bad thing. The gold-devouring insect and it had once been one body. Once their flesh merged again, it could have used its own powerful soul to swallow Jin Tong's soul directly. After that, it would only need to merge with her nascent soul and refine what remained of her, and everything would have been complete. But Hanli had just trapped its soul with a divine sense cage. In order to break free as quickly as possible, it had burned through far too much of its strength, while Jin Tong's aura had surged higher and higher through her relentless feeding. Under those shifting gains and losses, it no longer had the confidence to devour Jin Tong's soul. All it could do was lie low for now and wait for its soul to recover. The moment that thought crossed its mind, the gloom in its heart deepened. When its gaze swept toward Hanli, the fury in its eyes nearly erupted into flame. If not for that hateful human, that tiny gold-devouring insect would already have merged with it. That insignificant beast clan would already have been reduced to rubble. And the one who had dared trap it inside an illusion for 20 years would never have had the chance to strike at it. It was all because of him. From that moment on, there was no one else in the creature's eyes but Hanli alone. It wanted to kill him and vent its hatred. Hanli had long expected this. The instant the gold-devouring immortal broke free, he had already swallowed several pills, recovering immortal energy while also steadying his divine sense once more. The golden light around the gold-devouring immortal suddenly contracted. A scorching force radiated from its body, and wisps of white steam began to rise from its surface. Under the swirling steam, even the surrounding void started to twist and blur. A flash of blue light passed through Hanli's eyes. Before he could fully make out what was happening, his heart lurched. By instinct, his body blurred and he flashed aside. Almost at the exact same moment, the Tai stage gold-devouring immortal appeared where he had just been standing. Hanli had barely steadied himself when a streak of crystalline light shot through the void straight at him. His heart tightened. He fiercely activated the true mantra treasure wheel, making it reverse violently inside his body. His figure blurred again and vanished from the spot. The true mantra treasure will had somehow recovered? Joy rose in Hanli's heart at once. A spherical curtain of light burst outward from his body, expanding into a massive time-spirit domain that enveloped the entire bottom of the abyss. When the Tai stage gold-devouring immortal was brushed by that curtain of light, its eyes narrowed. It felt as though an invisible force had wrapped around its body, slowing the flow of time within the space enclosed by the light. Compared to the true mantra treasure wheel, the time-spirit domain covered a much wider area, but its slowing effect was far weaker. The gold-devouring immortal's speed was indeed restricted somewhat, but only enough that it could no longer move with the terrifying swiftness it had before. If Hanli let down his guard for even an instant, he could still be overtaken. And Hanli could also feel that the true mantra treasure wheel within him had not fully recovered. It might become unusable again at any moment. So all he could do was keep moving, dodging the gold-devouring immortal's pursuit, while urging Jin Tong through their spiritual connection to devour its flesh as quickly as possible. At the bottom of the abyss, one green streak and one golden streak flashed and chased each other back and forth. Even with Demon Light's eyesight, all he could see were blurred afterimages flickering in and out. Then came a thunderous boom. Dust exploded through the abyss as one wall of the mountain was smashed apart by the enormous body of the gold-devouring immortal. A vast torrent of rock collapsed from above, rolling down with the sound of endless thunder. Hanli burst out through the curtain of dust and smoke. Tapping lightly against empty air with the tip of his foot, He shot upward and flew toward a stone platform on the cliff wall above. A roar tore through the air. Seeing Han Li dodge its pursuit again, the Tai-stage gold-devouring immortal lost the last shred of patience it had left. This time it did not fly after him. Instead, it crouched low on the ground, its wings trembling violently. All the light around its body contracted at once. Even the scorching heat waves it had been releasing drew back in, and condensed around its surface into a strange substance that seemed to exist somewhere between light and gas. That substance gathered more and more densely, growing increasingly solid, and from within it came strange, deeply suppressed fluctuations. Seeing this from afar, Han Li frowned, a bad feeling rising in his chest. Inside the gold-devouring immortal's body, Jin Tong was tearing into its organs with huge bites when she suddenly noticed that the creature's internal organs had begun to tremble violently. Some of the flesh was even starting to vaporize as it shook, drifting outward from the body. The temperature inside it also began to rise wildly, turning the interior into something like a blazing furnace. On top of that, Jin Tong sensed an extremely abnormal pressure building inside the creature's belly. Even she found the aura frightening. Could it be? This thing wants to blow itself up and take everything down with it? The instant the thought occurred to her, Jin Tong did not try to flee. Instead, she urgently sent a message through their spiritual bond. Uncle, run. This thing might be about to self-destruct. Jin Tong, get out now. Han Li shot back at once, his brows tightly knitted. No. I'm going all out with it. Jin Tong replied with absolute resolve. Han Li's expression tightened. Gritting his teeth, he made the true will reverse violently inside him and shot upward into the baleful energy, blasting toward the sky above. After receiving the warning, demon light followed close behind. Their bodies had only just lifted off the ground when a blinding white light exploded from the depths of the abyss below. A world-shaking blast thundered up from the bottom of the gorge. A massive shockwave, powerful enough to destroy heaven and earth, swept out in surging waves, slamming over and over into the mountain walls on both sides. Boom after boom rolled without end. The abyss, which had not seen light for untold ages, suddenly seemed to give birth to a second sun. Dazzling white radiance filled every inch of it until the entire place shone with impossible brilliance. But within that white light, the walls of the abyss began to collapse layer by layer, retreating like dikes crumbling beneath a flood, dissolving little by little into the scorching radiance. At the same time, an enormous pillar of white light shot straight into the sky, burning away the baleful mist that filled the abyss and rising nearly 1,000 zhang above the mouth of the gorge. Inside that pillar of white light, a pitch-black figure floated with arms and legs spread wide like a kite caught in a storm. Every inch of flesh on its body was rotting away, giving off streams of white steam, as though the whole person were on the verge of melting. On its back, another figure was curled into a tight ball, wrapped in green light and completely untouched by the white radiance. Once the two figures rose out of the abyss, they immediately veered more than 10 miles to the left, escaping the range of the white light. They were, of course, Han Li and Demon Light, having narrowly escaped death from within the abyss. Han Li came to a halt in midair and looked at Demon Light's miserable state. "How are you? Can you still hold on?" Demon Light, now so mangled he no longer looked human, let out a grim laugh. "Heh, fellow Taoist Han, you won the gamble again." His voice was low and weak, clearly showing how badly he had been injured. And with all the flesh gone from his face, his rows of bare white teeth stretched into a ghastly grin that made the sight even more horrifying. The explosion of white light had happened far too fast. There had been no time at all to escape. At the critical moment, they had no choice but to gamble with their lives, using the gray immortal corpse as a shield against the white light, with Han Li's time spirit domain assisting to weaken the blast as much as possible. Yet after only a few hundred miles, Han Li's time spirit domain had shattered under the strain. In the end, they survived only because the gray immortal corpse held long enough to carry them out. Through their soul connection, Han Li could sense that Demon Light had suffered serious damage. But seeing that he could still laugh, Han Li knew his life was not in danger. His gaze shifted once more over the gray immortal corpse, and the more he looked, the more extraordinary that body seemed. Just then, rumbling sounds rose from the earth below. Han Li looked down and saw dust boiling up from the ground as the land continued collapsing inward. The abyss was gradually widening, becoming an enormous sunken basin. Even the valley not far away, where the tree demon had dwelled, collapsed beneath the rolling dust and was swallowed by the earth, buried under the surging clouds of baleful mist. Strange hissing cries rose from within for a short while, then faded away. Seeing the baleful energy constantly pouring upward below, demon light immediately flashed downward and plunged into it. Threads of baleful mist streamed into his body. Skin gradually began to regrow over his surface. Whatever condition his insides were in, at least his outward injuries were slowly repairing themselves. Just then Han Li's gaze shifted sharply toward the dust-covered ground below. Within the rolling smoke and baleful haze, an enormous shadow suddenly rose. The Tai stage gold-devouring immortal flew out from the chaos and lunged toward Han Li again. "Why are you still not dead?" The furious roar came from the creature one word at a time, every syllable filled with unwillingness and hatred. "What a persistent ghost!" Han Li cursed inwardly as he sped away. At that moment Jin Tong's voice rang out again. "Uncle, hold on a little longer. Once I bite through its heart vein, then I can." For some reason, before she could finish speaking, her voice cut off abruptly. "Jin Tong, what happened?" Han Li's heart clenched. He immediately called out to her through their spiritual link, but there was no reply. Blue light flashed in his eyes as he looked toward the gold-devouring immortal from afar. He saw that it had dropped back to the ground, its body already hidden within the roaring dust and surging baleful mist, impossible to see clearly. At that moment the crab Taoist, who had long since withdrawn to a safe distance, came flying back in a streak of golden light and arrived beside Han Li. "Fellow Taoists, yeah, something seems to have happened to Jin Tong. I need to go down and look." "Stay here and guard demon light for a while," Han Li said, sensing that something was wrong. "Very well. Go," the crab Taoist replied after glancing toward demon light in the mist. A flash of green light burst around Han Li, and he shot downward once more, plunging back into the completely collapsed abyss. Following the faint thread of aura he could still detect, his figure flickered rapidly through the shattered rocks. Before long, he found the enormous golden beetle deep within the ruins. But the next instant, his brow furrowed slightly. The Tai stage gold-devouring immortal was lying motionless on the ground, its entire body covered in a layer of almost crystalline light. Other than that, there was no sign of Jin Tong anywhere. If not for the weak trace of their spiritual connection, he would have thought she had already met with disaster. Steadying himself, Han Li immediately swept his divine sense over the golden beetle. Though its vitality had suffered heavy losses, it was still vigorous, and the fluctuations of its consciousness were especially intense. After a brief moment of thought, Han Li understood. Most likely the Tai stage gold-devouring immortal, seeing that Jin Tong was on the verge of biting through its heart vein, had no choice but to charge into her sea of consciousness and try to devour her soul. And that was indeed exactly what had happened. Inside Jin Tong's sea of consciousness, monstrous waves were rising and crashing without end. Two golden beetles, one large and one small, were savagely tearing at each other. The slightly larger gold-devouring insect held the advantage in size, but its glow was somewhat dim, clearly showing that it had not fully recovered from its injuries. The smaller one, however, shone brilliantly with golden light and held the advantage of fighting on its own ground, which made it even more ferocious. There was no exchange of words, no communication of thought between them. At this moment each held only one idea. Either you die or I do. Rip. Tear. Boom. Again and again, the sounds of ripping echoed through the sea of consciousness. Parts of both insects were being devoured by the other, yet no blood flowed. Instead, layers of hazy golden light drifted out like mist. The Tai gold-devouring insect's soul lunged forward, but after Jin Tong dodged aside, it could not stop its momentum in time. Before it could even turn, Jin Tong clamped down on one of its wing segments and tore it away. At that very instant, however, the Tai stage gold-devouring immortal suddenly twisted around. Ignoring the fact that its own wing had just been torn off, it bit savagely toward Jin Tong's head. Jin Tong could not dodge in time. She was about to lose her head in a single bite, but at the critical instant, a streak of snow-white crystalline light suddenly appeared out of nowhere above the sea of consciousness. Like a bolt of white lightning, It crashed down onto the head of the Tai stage gold-devouring immortal, making it shudder violently before it tumbled away. When that white crystalline light flashed past, Jin Tong's soul also felt a piercing pain, almost more than she could endure. But this was still her own sea of consciousness, the source of her spiritual power. Gritting her teeth and bearing the pain, she immediately lunged at the gold-devouring immortal's soul and tore into its head. Outside the creature's body, Han Li sat cross-legged on the ground, his face slightly pale and his eyes closed as he regulated his breathing. It had been he who, sensing Jin Tong's danger, had once again used the spirit refinement secret art, and forcibly sent a strand of crystallized divine thought into her sea of consciousness, saving her life. By noon the next day, a crisp crack woke Han Li from meditation. He first glanced at Demon Light and the crab Taoist, both sitting not far from him, then turned toward the shell of the Tai stage gold-devouring immortal. The crystalline layer covering it had already shattered, and the enormous life force inside it was beginning to drain away at an alarming speed. Then Jin Tong flew out through the wound in the gold-devouring immortal's body. Han Li smiled when he saw her and was just about to speak when Jin Tong said expressionlessly, "Uncle, please guard me for a while." A barely noticeable crease appeared between Han Li's brows, but he said nothing and simply nodded. He, the crab Taoist, and Demon Light all withdrew more than 10 miles away, each taking a separate position so that together they formed a defensive triangle, leaving Jin Tong and the corpse of the Tai stage gold-devouring immortal in the center. Jin Tong glanced at the three of them from afar. Only then did golden light flare from her body. Floating above the corpse, she slowly closed her eyes. With a wave of both small hands, vast torrents of golden radiance poured out of her body. They intertwined and churned in midair, forming a golden vortex that kept expanding. In the blink of an eye, it had already grown to several hundred zhang across. Countless golden runes whirled and flashed within it, giving off intense fluctuations of law power mixed with a restless, violent aura. The ruined body of the golden beetle was drawn up by the vortex and slowly swallowed into it. Jin Tong abruptly opened her eyes. The golden light around her body thickened at once, spraying outward in solid streams of golden flame. The next instant, all the natural energy within 10,000 miles rushed madly toward the golden vortex. The nearby earth split apart as visible streams of spiritual power burst from underground, drawn from buried spirit veins and pulled toward the vortex as well. In moments, vast clouds of five-colored spiritual mist appeared above the vortex, covering the sky. Streaks of five-colored lightning rolled within those clouds, flickering in and out of view. Inside the golden vortex, Jin Tong's body gradually became veiled by the surrounding light. Her figure blurred, seeming to melt into it, yet her aura could be felt rising in surging waves, becoming stronger and stronger. Han Li stood in midair at a distance, took out 2 pills, swallowed them, and silently watched everything unfolding before him. Demon Light stood with his hands clasped behind his back, also silent, though his gaze flickered faintly as though he were thinking about something. The crab Taoist simply sat down cross-legged, looking at his nose and his heart in perfect stillness, as if none of this had anything to do with him. "So boss is advancing again." Pixiu appeared beside Han Li at some unknown point, craning his neck to stare at the scene in the sky. Golden light reflected in his eyes, and they were filled with envy. The golden vortex spun faster and faster. The huge body of the golden beetle was slowly drawn deeper into it. Then, with a thunderous crash, the golden vortex suddenly expanded. At its center appeared a blinding golden sphere of light no one could look at directly, while countless large and small golden runes flickered around it, accompanied by bursts of chanting that sounded like ancient sacred voices. At that very moment, the surface of the golden sphere at the center of the vortex suddenly became unstable. Bulges rose again and again across it, and it shook violently without pause. At the same time, low growls came from inside. The voice was clearly Jin Tong's, but it sounded agitated and filled with pain. Han Li frowned, his expression turning grave. Within the golden vortex, shadows flickered. A huge phantom of a golden beetle appeared indistinctly. It looked exactly like the gold-devouring immortal that had just been slain. It raced and roared through the vortex, ferocious and menacing, and from time to time it snarled furiously toward the golden light sphere in the center. Even though Jin Tong destroyed the creature's primordial spirit, some mixed resentment still remains in the corpse, and some of it does not even belong to that gold-devouring immortal itself. If she wants to absorb that corpse completely, she must first overcome this lingering resentment. Whether she can do that or not, I do not know, Demon Light suddenly said. The moment his words fell, a huge shriek burst from the golden sphere. Then a thick pillar of golden light shot out from within. The light spread, transforming into another gigantic phantom golden beetle. It was Jin Tong. A thunderous explosion rang out. Jin Tong's phantom blazed with golden radiance as she charged ferociously toward the other golden beetle phantom. The opposing phantom showed no fear. It leaped up to meet her. The two immediately clashed together, golden light surging and tangling violently as deafening booms erupted one after another. The beetle phantom formed by Jin Tong was slightly smaller, and at first was at a disadvantage, being forced steadily backward. This is bad. Boss seems to be losing, master. Pixiu cried anxiously. We cannot help in this battle, Hanli said, shaking his head, his face calm. No sooner had he spoken than a crash came from ahead. The other golden beetle phantom flared with light and slammed Jin Tong flying away. Letting out an excited screech, it lunged after her, its massive body pouncing forward. Both huge forelimbs chopped down with terrifying speed and weight, clearly intending to cut Jin Tong into 3 pieces on the spot. But just then Jin Tong's staggering retreat suddenly steadied. Her body twisted sharply, turning into an afterimage, and with astonishing speed she slipped between the descending forelimbs, flashing in an instant to the creature's back. The golden beetle froze for a moment, unable to react in time. Its body suddenly tightened as Jin Tong locked onto it from behind, holding it fast. Her 2 forelimbs slashed downward in a crossing strike aimed straight at its head. Clang! Unable to turn and face her, the golden beetle desperately raised both forelimbs beside its head and barely blocked the blow. All 4 forelimbs locked together. Sparks of golden light erupted wildly where they met, accompanied by shrill grinding cries. A crazed look flashed through Jin Tong's eyes. Suddenly she threw back her head and let out a scream that pierced the clouds. Golden light exploded from her body, and the brilliance on her forelimbs became almost unbearable to behold. A sharp metallic sound rang through the air. Jin Tong's forelimbs cut through the other beetle's forelimbs, and then swept straight across its head. The golden beetle's head shot into the sky. Its enormous body convulsed twice, then exploded with a thunderous blast, scattering into countless streaks of golden light. At that moment, the phantom formed by Jin Tong suddenly opened its mouth wide and inhaled deeply. The golden light from the other beetle immediately flew toward her in a torrent, turning into a rushing golden flood that poured into Jin Tong's open jaws. Her phantom shone with blazing radiance. Spiritual light rippled across her body, and the huge form immediately grew far more solid. Then it began to change, slowly turning into a tall, slender, indistinct humanoid silhouette. An overwhelming pressure radiated from that vague human shape. It was not spiritual pressure, but something far more primal, a vast oppression that seemed to come from a difference in life itself, like the feeling a mortal would have when standing before an immortal god. Han Li and the others, standing far away, were suddenly caught beneath that pressure with no warning. Pixiu suffered the worst. Blood seeped faintly from all 7 orifices, and with a miserable cry his body turned into a streak of white light that dropped to Han Li's waist, becoming a white jade pendant once more. Han Li himself felt his vision go dark. His chest seemed to take a crushing blow, and he staggered backward more than 10 steps before barely regaining his footing. Sensing danger, the crab Taoist immediately transformed into a streak of yellow light, and flew back into Han Li's body. Only Demon Light, though still badly injured, managed to hold steady after swaying a few times, his cultivation having grown greatly since taking possession of the gray immortal body. The golden humanoid figure existed for only a few breaths before turning into a streak of golden light, and sinking back into the golden sphere. The golden vortex swelled once more, as though a giant golden mouth had suddenly opened and inhaled. An enormous suction force roared out. All the 5-colored spiritual clouds in the sky came rolling down and vanished into the vortex. The golden vortex seemed like a bottomless pit, endlessly devouring the clouds above while slowly growing larger. It continued swallowing for a full quarter of an hour until every spiritual cloud in the sky had vanished. Only then did the golden vortex gradually slow, and suddenly begin shrinking at great speed. A few breaths later, the vortex was gone, and the sky returned to calm. All that remained was a golden sphere about the size of a man, suspended quietly in midair like a giant golden egg. Seeing this, Han Li let out a quiet breath of relief, but in his mind the terrifying golden humanoid figure from before kept replaying itself, impossible to dismiss. The golden sphere floated in the air, bright flashes of gold rippling over its surface from time to time. From within came waves of aura so alarming they made the heart shudder, as though something dreadful were being nurtured inside. After a brief moment of thought, Han Li moved. His figure blurred, and in the next instant he appeared beside the golden sphere. A streak of white light shot from his sleeve and spun through the air, turning into a small white flag. It was the immortal treasure he had obtained from Gongshu Jiu. With one hand seal, Han Li activated it. The white flag immediately expanded in the wind into a massive snow-white banner dozens of zhang tall, fluttering loudly in the air. As it waved, endless white mist rolled out from it, and in the blink of an eye formed a white cloud several mu in size, completely swallowing the golden sphere. The cloud seemed able to conceal the fluctuations of aura. The terrifying presence leaking from the golden sphere was immediately suppressed by more than half, and no longer felt so overwhelming. Let's leave this place first. Han Li formed another seal and was just about to move the cloud-wrapped golden sphere away with him when his face suddenly changed and he stopped. Not far ahead, a white-robed man had appeared without anyone noticing. He looked to be in his 30s or 40s, strikingly handsome, with flowing black hair mixed with a streak of gold that shimmered faintly. Han Li's expression turned grave. This white-robed man had appeared utterly soundlessly, and without the slightest warning. Even with Han Li's powerful divine sense, he had not detected him at all. Demon Light was equally startled. He too had sensed nothing. It was as though the man had simply appeared out of thin air. What was more, although the man was not releasing any formidable aura, Han Li's instincts told him clearly that the person before him was anything but ordinary. The white-robed man looked Han Li up and down, then glanced at Demon Light. For a moment, he seemed to have no intention of speaking. "May I ask who Senior is?" Han Li asked slowly, thoughts already racing through his mind. "You are quite impressive. You did manage to surprise me," the white-robed man said with a smile, ignoring Han Li's question. Han Li was shaken inwardly. From that seemingly casual line, he could tell the man might have arrived long ago, perhaps even watching the entire battle against the gold-devouring immortal. "Wait! Your voice!" Han Li suddenly seemed to realize something. He cupped his fist and asked, "Was it Senior who imprisoned that gold-devouring immortal for 20 years and warned me by voice transmission not to advance?" "Yes. It was me," the man in white said calmly. "Many thanks, Senior, for your assistance." Han Li's expression straightened and he bowed deeply. If that gold-devouring immortal had not been trapped for 20 years, then both he and Jin Tong would likely have died by now, and in all probability they would have ended up inside its belly. To him, this white-robed man had truly been a life-saving benefactor. "I was only acting on another's request," the white-robed man said flatly. Han Li froze. That answer was far beyond what he had expected. "I helped you escape danger as repayment for your kindness in saving Lure back then. From this day on, the karma between you and her is severed. There will be no more ties between you," the man said calmly. Lure? She is with Senior? How is she now?" Han Li asked at once, surprise showing on his face. "Lure is doing very well now. Although the two of you shared a period of time together in the spirit ring realm, I have already said it. The karma between you is finished. There is no need for the two of you to meet again in the future," the white-robed man said, his expression turning slightly colder. "Yes," Han Li answered after a moment of silence. Though the white-robed man had not revealed his cultivation, Han Li was almost certain he was a great encompassing expert. In front of such an existence, no matter how unwilling he felt inside, all he could do was nod. As long as Lure was living well, that was enough. "And one more thing. You are not to tell anyone about what happened here," the white-robed man added after seeing Han Li agree, his expression easing slightly. Hearing that, Han Li felt a flicker of surprise, but none of it showed on his face. He simply nodded again. The white-robed man gave a slight nod, then flipped a hand and took out an object. It was a green jade slip which he tossed over. Hanli instinctively caught it. "This is a map. Leave here quickly. And do not return to this place again in the future," the white-robed man said. As he spoke, his gaze swept across the group and lingered a little longer on Demon Light. There seemed to be a strange glint in his eyes. Then his figure swayed, and he vanished from the spot as though he had never been there at all. Hanli raised a brow and gave a bitter smile. It seemed human cultivators truly were not welcome in this savage realm. If not for Luluer, that white-robed man probably would not even have bothered speaking to him. He might have attacked directly. Phew. This man felt even more terrifying than that Tai-stage gold-devouring immortal. Could he be a great encompassing existence? Demon Light said slowly, seeming relieved, gray light flickering in his eyes as he glanced sideways at Hanli. Hanli said nothing. After standing in silence for a while, he drew a deep breath, settled his emotions, and extended a sliver of restored divine sense into the green jade slip. At once joy rose in his heart. The map the white-robed man had given him was remarkably detailed. What was more, it clearly marked out 4 enormous domains, with explicit warnings stating that these regions belonged to 4 major clans, and that outsiders were forbidden to enter. Trespassers would be killed without mercy. One of the regions Hanli had passed through before belonged to the Heavenly Fox clan. It seemed their ancestor was the very white-robed man he had just met. Luluer had once said she had been borrowed away by her own people. Now it looked highly likely that she had been taken by the Heavenly Fox clan. If that was the case, Hanli no longer needed to worry too much about her. Outside those 4 territories, the map also marked a relatively safe route leading all the way to the Black Mountain Immortal Domain. Hanli studied the map for a moment, then withdrew his divine sense. "Fellow Taoist Han, what do you plan to do now?" Demon Light asked. "Since that man has already made it clear we are not welcome, we should leave. Better not cause any unnecessary misunderstanding," Hanli said, saying nothing more. He waved a hand and summoned the emerald flying carriage, then formed a seal. The white cloud quickly shrank, turning into a dense white mist sphere that wrapped around Jin Tong's golden cocoon and settled onto the carriage. "Fellow Taoist Han, do you have a beast pouch with attributes on you?" Demon Light suddenly asked. Hanli was briefly stunned, then searched through his belongings and took out a black beast pouch, handing it over. It was an attributed beast pouch he had obtained from Chu Ling, and the space inside was quite large. "Many thanks. Please wait for me a moment," Demon Light said. After thanking him, he flew down toward the abyss and quickly landed at the bottom. The abyss was now riddled with devastation, reduced to a giant crater. Most of the once dense baleful energy had already leaked away, leaving only a small amount behind. Demon Light waved his hand and cast a spell. The beast pouch shot out at once, its opening spreading wide as a powerful suction force emerged. The remaining baleful energy at the bottom of the crater immediately came rushing in, turning into a pillar of black mist that poured into the pouch. There was not much left. In only a short time, every trace of baleful energy in the abyss had been collected into the pouch. The once flat beast pouch swelled and bulged. From within came the sound of liquid sloshing back and forth. The bag, once light as a feather, now turned heavy and weighty, at least 200 or 300 jin. Even through the pouch itself, one could sense the incredibly dense baleful aura inside. A pleased expression appeared on Demon Light's face. He stored the pouch away, shot back into the sky, and landed on the emerald carriage. Hanli looked at him but said nothing. He lifted a hand. A flash of golden lightning flickered, and the crab Taoist appeared once more. "Follow this route and take control of the carriage," Hanli said, handing the jade slip to him. The crab Taoist accepted the slip, checked it briefly, then cast a spell. The emerald carriage blazed with light and transformed into a green rainbow that shot into the distance, heading away behind them. Hanli walked to one side of the carriage and closed his eyes, turning his awareness inward to inspect the immortal apertures within his body. At this moment, among his 107 immortal apertures, more than half had been opened through the profound fiend nether spirit art. In each aperture, a mass of black baleful energy swirled slowly. The apertures he had broken through inside the abyss contained especially dense black baleful mist. Hanli sighed inwardly. Though the profound fiend nether spirit art had raised his cultivation at astonishing speed, it felt like drinking poison to quench thirst. If he wished to advance into the Tai stage in the future, it would likely become extremely difficult. After all, when breaking into the Tai stage, one would have to face the fifth of the 5 heavenly declines, and this baleful energy itself was a great enemy to that breakthrough. He remained silent for a while, then shook his head and stopped dwelling on it. Slowly he began circulating his cultivation art, healing the hidden injuries left behind from the fierce battle.